Today we have the fortune of having with us Ramez Naam. Ramez had a very successful business career, and then after doing that, he went on to do great things. He's an author, he's faculty at Singularity University, and he recently wrote a book, which I think is amazing. It's called The Infinite Resource. And it talks about the world and how we can make it better. So, Ramez, thank you for being here with us. It's great to have you.
Ignacio, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Great. Ramez, could you tell me about the best of times and the worst of times? You open the book with these grand statements saying that the world is at the best of times, the worst of times. Can you explain?
It's a quote from Charles Dickens. He opens A Tale of Two Cities with that. The quote is, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." And he goes on and on about how people viewed it in both ways, and the superlative and the negative. And I saw that as how people look at the world now, that many people at Singularity University, where I teach, in Silicon Valley, where I spend a lot of time, see all these wonderful things going on, and that is their focus, and that's their view, that this is the best time ever in human history, and there's a lot to support that. And indeed, when you look at any metric about how well human beings are doing, how long we live, how many years of education we have, what fraction of people live in democracies, our access to information, how many of us have access to the internet or books or cell phones, all of those are at an all-time high. Disease is at an all-time low, poverty is at an all-time low. Those are fantastic. But then many others are convinced this is the worst of times. And there is some justification for those claims as well. Less justification, I think, but still some. And those are, if you look at the situation of the natural resources and environment upon which we depend, it is not that all metrics there are at their all-time worst. Some have actually rebounded. But we are facing some of the worst threats that we have seen to the natural resources and environmental services that we depend upon. The world's forests are at their all-time smallest. The world's ocean fish stocks are at their smallest. The world oil reserves are at their smallest. And the world's climate is at its warmest, and carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere are climbing at their fastest.
So what about the trend? When we look forward, what does the future look like?
Well, that's always hard to say. Yogi Berra, an American baseball coach, is quoted, perhaps wrongly, as saying, predictions are hard, especially about the future. The trend, the real future is up to us. But the trend lines right now are innovation is driving tremendous advances for humanity. Poverty is declining, hunger is declining, our lives need to get longer, and so on. And there are tremendous innovations that could help reverse those environmental problems, but at the same time, right now, many of those environmental problems are continuing to get worse. We're still pumping more CO2 into the atmosphere. We are still pumping, we're still destroying more of the fish stocks that we have. Underneath that, though, I believe that there are disruptive innovations in new technologies that I think will help us turn the corner on those problems, as we have on many environmental problems in the past. Problems like the ozone layer depletion, problems like water pollution in many parts of the world, air pollution in many parts of the world, acid rain is a problem we dealt with in North America. Problems like that were once severe and we dealt with them in many parts of the world, and in some cases like ozone globally. And I believe that the exponential technologies that we see in areas like energy will help us eventually turn the corner on the big problems that we face now, like climate change. The question is, how fast can we do it, and how soon can we do it?
In your book, you talk about innovation and the power of innovation to transform civilization, and you show that China in the past should have been the most successful country, but it wasn't. Europe ruled. Can you tell us about that? So and how it shows the way forward in terms of our attitude towards innovation, and what should countries and regions like Latin America do regarding innovation?
Absolutely. If you go back to 1,000 years ago, the most successful, the richest society on Earth was China. Europe was in what's called now the Dark Ages. That's probably a slight exaggeration. But the Chinese empire was strong, or the Chinese civilization overall was prosperous. Empires grew and fell, but even so, China had a rich population. They had invented gunpowder, they had writing, they had silk, they had more sophisticated agriculture, and China was more advanced than Europe in almost every measure. Yet China didn't completely stagnate, but it innovated much more slowly and advanced much more slowly than the technological innovation that we saw in Europe. And really, especially starting at about 1300, 1400, the Renaissance and then the scientific revolution swept through Europe and led to an incredible explosion of technological and scientific advancement in Europe, often taking technologies that largely existed in China or that were imported from China and other parts of Asia and recombining them. And that led to runaway growth in Europe that left Asia tremendously behind until roughly a century ago, or really until about 1970, that Asia started to catch up again, or China at least started to catch up again. And a lot of that was because of the tolerance for diversity of ideas, for competition, and for bottoms-up versus top-down methods of organizing society. In China, a lot of society was very hierarchical. The emperor had a lot of control. A lot of society was structured in a meritocratic system, which was very admirable, but where there was a nationwide system of tests for advancement, where one had to learn the proper way to do things. And there was one country and one political system that controlled the entire area. In Europe, it was a fractious system that had as many as 35 kingdoms at a time, at times, all struggling and vying for control and for dominance and for relative advantage. And that led to lots of competing ideas, lots of struggle to get one up on the other, and that actually fostered a faster sort of Darwinian innovation of ideas. One of the best examples I have here is that China actually had a fleet that left that was tremendously larger than Columbus's fleet. Dozens and dozens of ships, thousands of sailors. It sailed from China down to the southern coast of India, and it could have sailed around the world, but when the explorers came back, the Chinese emperor ordered all of the ships burnt and declared that Chinese people shouldn't leave China, and China needed nothing from the outside world. And the admiral of that fleet had no choice but to comply with that. There was no one else he could go to. The emperor was it. Columbus, on the other hand, was rejected in his efforts to fund his tiny, tiny expedition of 3 ships and about 100 sailors, orders of magnitude smaller than the Chinese expedition. He was rejected more than a dozen times. He went as a pauper from ruler to ruler to ruler to ruler to ruler. Isabella rejected him once. Isabella and Ferdinand. Isabella rejected him once. Even the second time, 5 years later, he went to her. She rejected him again. And it was only when he was leaving that Ferdinand said to Isabella, maybe we should just take a chance on this guy. He'll probably never come back. He'll die out there, but what the heck? Let's give him a little bit of money. And then they found him on the street. A messenger found him and pulled him back. So it's because of this diversity of different ideas out there and different ways to get backing for one's idea that many more ideas were tried, and so good ideas could pop to the top.
But is it only diversity of idea, or is it also openness towards innovation?
Excellent. Yes, openness to innovation. Openness to innovations from outside, openness to innovations from inside, openness to ideas that might be wrong, that might be totally different from how you've done anything in the past, whether you came up with them, whether a child came up with them, whether a stranger who's not part of your culture came up with them. And many cultures did not have that. And the cultures that rejected new ideas from the outside or from the inside stagnate. And the cultures that welcome new ideas, whether generated internally or externally, are the ones that advance the most rapidly. That's true in corporations, that's true in politics, that's true on a societal level.
So if we bring that to today, what you're saying is that if we close ourselves to innovation, because, for example, we think robots will take our jobs and we need to close our economies, or artificial intelligence maybe, or renewable energies may not be in the best interest of certain industries, incumbent industries, then we will pay a high price in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not that every new idea is a good one, but if you find that you are rejecting all new ideas, then you are certainly doing something wrong. And you shouldn't reflexively reject ideas because they are new or because they are different or alien. So new ideas deserve a hearing, and they often deserve being tried out. Often your initial assessment of an idea will be negative simply on the basis that it is alien, that it is different than anything that you have done before. And we often have a sort of a bias against such things. And so it's worth trying these things out to see what happens and what positive gain can be wrung from them. It's worth remembering that the Luddites, I don't know if you have this as a common phrase, okay? The Luddites were founded by Ned Ludd. Ned Ludd destroyed the mechanical loom that wove cloth because he feared that it would destroy jobs. And it did. The mechanical loom did destroy the jobs of cloth weavers. And yet that era of automation was a huge boon to humanity. It destroyed a whole lot of jobs, yet it made a whole lot of services and products hugely cheaper, which enriched us. I wouldn't be wearing this shirt if the mechanical loom didn't exist. We wouldn't be living in homes like this or having heating or any of the products that we have if it wasn't for that era of invention of mechanical devices. And that also created new niches for new jobs that didn't exist before. So I'm not saying that all new inventions are necessarily good, but often the positive is not one that we see right away, and it needs to be explored to be found.
So let's bring this discussion to Latin America. Many people may think that this is all good, but it will not really affect fairly close economies, which actually live from natural resources, and that we shouldn't be too concerned because the need for natural resources will be there in the next 30 years, and that we can live from oil, we can live from agricultural production. We should be okay with that, and we can consume technology, but we don't need to, or we can't even be part of the innovation revolution. What would you say to that view of the world?
You know, the Saudi Minister of Oil has a great quote. He says, "The Stone Age didn't end because they ran out of stones." Okay. Let's unpack that quote. What he's really saying there is, the reason that stone is no longer the dominant commodity in the world is because people invented bronze, copper plus tin. They invented a new technology that made stone irrelevant. So anyone that bets that they're going to retain a high value because of a current natural resource is betting against innovation. They're betting that no one is going to create something that makes their current commodity less valuable. Vinod Khosla, who's a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, he's a billionaire who made his money at Sun Microsystems and then leading one of the top 5 venture capital firms in the world, has said the price of oil will in the future be low because we will use so little of it. And his viewpoint is we will eventually invent replacements for pumping oil out of the ground by being able to create synthetic oil ourselves out of the carbon dioxide we can suck out of the air and combine with sunlight. And we are approaching that. We're certainly in other areas of energy. I think the dominant days for coal and natural gas are going to be ending before people think. And we can talk about that in the trends therein.
Yeah, actually, is that only a threat to Latin America, or is there an opportunity in there for Latin America as well?
It's a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity for Argentina in particular, and also for Brazil, and also for Chile, and also for Peru, because Latin America is so well endowed with sunlight throughout the region, and in Argentina's case, with wind as well. And the sun and wind are incredibly abundant. They actually dwarf the amount of energy that we get from coal, natural gas, and oil. Let me show you some slides, actually, if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this drop of oil represents all the energy that humanity uses from all sources combined, mostly fossil fuels, oil, natural gas, and coal. It's a very large drop of oil, but it's actually tiny compared to the continual bombardment of our planet by solar energy, by the amount of sunlight hitting our planet. We don't think about this very often, but the continual influx of energy from the sun is huge. It's actually about 10,000 times as much energy hitting our planet from the outside as we use from all of that fossil fuels and other energy sources combined. That means that 10 seconds of sunlight hitting our planet has the same energy content as 1 day of humanity's energy use. 1 hour of sunlight has the same energy content as 1 year of humanity's energy use. It's just staggering. That manifests as wind by heating parts of the atmosphere differentially. It drives evaporation of water that comes down as rainfall that we can tap into as hydropower. And it comes down as direct photons that strike the Earth in such a large amount that less than 0.5% of the Earth's land area, these little green dots, are enough to provide enough energy to power humanity for the foreseeable future. Up until now, the problem has been cost, but that has been changing extremely rapidly. Renewables are dropping in cost in a way that no other technology is. So wind cost, for instance, was 30 years ago incredibly expensive. It was 55 cents a kilowatt hour in the US, which is something like 10 times the cost of traditional electricity. But in that time, it has dropped by a factor of 10. And in the best wind sites in the US, it's actually half that cost, about 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour, or less than half the price of the cheapest fossil fuel electricity in the US. And Argentina, as I'll show you, has more wind energy than the US or than almost any other country in the world. And that has driven an incredible explosion of wind power around the world. In the last just 11 years, we've gone from 31 gigawatts of wind power deployed around the world to more than 300 gigawatts. So a 10 times growth, a 1,000% growth of wind power in 11 years, which no fossil fuel energy source has gone through anything like a 1,000 times or 1,000% growth in anything like a decade. And this is a map of wind speeds around the world. Blue is the lowest wind speeds. Red is the highest, with dark red being the very highest. And if you look at Argentina, down at the bottom, Patagonia has incredibly high and incredibly consistent wind speeds. So does Chile, actually. This is very, very good news for wind in large parts of Latin America. And indeed, this is a map created by Bloomberg, New Energy Finance, that shows what's the cost of wind energy by different countries relative to their current cost of electricity. And all the countries that are inside that blue region are areas where Bloomberg believes that wind energy is already cheaper than the grid. And Argentina is the right bottommost of those dots. And in fact, the further right you are is what's the capacity factor of wind? How often is the wind actually blowing? And they rate Argentina as the country with the most consistent winds in the entire world, actually, and with low cost wind power overall, a lower cost than the electricity is in Argentina. So Argentina is really poised to be sort of a wind superpower in the entire world. And this is how much wind power has been deployed in Argentina. It's been growing rapidly from a very low base, with most of that being in southern provinces, with one new project that will dwarf everything else, actually. This project, the Gastre project, funded by a Chinese bank, 1.35 gigawatts being built right now with projected finish date by 2017. If we look at that and compare it to what's been happening in Argentina so far, this is the chart of wind power deployment to date. Here's what will happen when that project is complete. So you're really just starting a wind power explosion in Argentina. And even with that, if you compare it to how much wind power is deployed in European countries, it will just barely put Argentina sort of on this map. You'll still be at sort of the third tier. So there's still a huge, huge potential, because Argentina has about as much wind energy potential as most of these countries combined, in fact. Wow. It's really, really staggering. That's how much wind energy there is, because, again, this is the intensity of winds, the speeds of winds, and again, in the southern provinces and Patagonia, the speeds are extremely fast and extremely consistent. Some of the fastest and most consistent winds in the entire world. So this is how much wind power is the top 10 countries for wind power in the world right now, and how much they have and how much they've added. China became number one just in 2012 and is actually running away with it. But if we ranked this by how much natural resources they had, it should be different. We should insert Argentina here, number 3, because Argentina is about the third best endowed country in the world right now. And right now it's not on this list at all. That's where we think Argentina should be on this list. It should be a wind superpower, really. So that's wind. Solar globally is an even better power. This is a wafer of silicon microchips, and I show this here to show how expensive solar once was, because it's been made a lot like this. But solar has changed dramatically over the years. It's gotten a lot cheaper, and that has led to an incredible explosion of solar. I told you that wind power has gone up by a factor of 10 or 1,000% in 11 years, but solar has climbed even faster, from 1.3 gigawatts to 130 gigawatts in 13 years, 100 times growth, 10,000%, which is just, it's exponential. Solar is growing almost like information technology grows, not like energy. People think about energy and their intuitions don't apply to solar because it grows more like microchips and telecom than it does like traditional energy. And it looks like it will triple again in just the next 4 years. And that's because of this incredible price reduction, that over the last 30-odd years, the price has gone down by a factor of 100. A 100 times decline in the price of an energy source is, again, it's staggering. It's nothing like how people are used to thinking of energy. And that means that in many parts of the world, we're seeing a crossover where it's starting to be cheaper than other sorts of energy. So here's a project in the US where it's below grid price. Grid price is usually about 6 cents. The south of Spain, Cádiz, beautiful place, 250 megawatt project. The Sambar Ultra project in India, 4 gigawatt. This is a project that is larger than any fossil fuel power plant, and it will be cheaper than grid price there. And in Chile, close to Argentina, your immediate neighbor, 162 megawatt project won by First Solar, a US company, and it was not based on subsidies or mandates. Natural gas companies competed for this, coal companies competed for this, and First Solar won the project simply on the basis of price. So that's what's happening right now. And they won this project a year ago. Since then, prices have declined another 20–30% already. So that's what's happening here. This is an interesting analysis that just came out a few days ago. This is wind and solar. This is based in the US. This is from a financial firm. It has no environmental interest or anything. This is purely financial. It's a slightly difficult chart to read. But if you look at this, the black dashed lines when the yellow bars are the prices of the last 5 years of, on the left, wind, and on the right, solar. And it shows that wind power prices have declined in 5 years. The price of electricity that they offer has declined by 58%. Solar prices in the last 5 years have declined by 78%. They've gone down by somewhere between 4 and 5 times in 5 years. Okay? And the range that you see, those yellow bars, are the range of prices from the sunniest areas to the less sunny areas, from the windiest areas to the less windy areas. Right? So there is a range on geography. The red bars I've added myself are the price in the US of electricity. The bottom red line is the the base load power price of the plants that just the coal plants mostly that operate all day long. And you see wind power, even in the US, is now the best wind sites, the average wind sites even, are just competing with those coal plants. And then the top red line are the peak power prices, because in the middle of the day, electricity is more expensive because everyone wants it, and they have to bring special plants on. And so both solar and wind are now undercutting the peak power price. So this is starting to be a very, very different situation. You also know this is, again, as I mentioned about the geography, it doesn't happen everywhere at once, right? I live in Seattle, Washington, the upper northwest of this. It's a little green spot. It's cloudy outside right now, unfortunately. But in the US, the solar is in the southwest. In the world, Germany has deployed the most solar, but it's really the south of Europe that has much more. And globally, it's really the Latin America, Africa, south of Asia, India, Australia. Those are the places that have the most solar. In fact, if you take the places that have energy poverty, they're actually extremely well blessed with solar, which is very, very good news. But so particularly is Latin America. Look at that map of South America, Central America. That is an area of much, much more solar availability than Europe is by far, or than China is by far, though China has far more solar. And if we zoom in on just Argentina, Chile, large parts of South America here, and we look at the solar availability there, it's really quite high. This one corner of Argentina has a tremendous amount of solar. Let's look at Germany instead. So Germany is the world's leader in solar. It has 38 gigawatts of solar deployed, which is about 3,000 times as much solar as Argentina has. And in fact, Germany's solar panels exceed all of Argentina's use of electricity. Germany's solar by itself. But yet Germany it's got this greenish color. Germany is far less sunny than Argentina is, right? Even on average, but certainly less sunny than this one intensely red part of Argentina. It's even more shocking, though, when you put Germany to scale next to Argentina, because Germany is actually not a very large country either. So that one little corner of Argentina in the northwest has more than twice as much solar energy falling on it than the entire country of Germany. So Argentina could be a wind superpower and it could be a solar superpower, both. It's really poised to be, and those are the technologies of the future. So now even the International Energy Agency, which is very conservative, has said solar would be the largest source of electricity by mid-century, and they're saying 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So again, normally in the U.S., the cheapest electricity you can buy is 6 cents. They're saying rooftop solar, unbeatable. They're showing this sort of chart, which is extremely conservative. That's 10% annual growth rate when it's actually been about 40% per year. Just saying, the IEA is always very conservative. Shell, a fuel company, they say that in the long term, they think solar will be about 40% and wind about 8% of the world's energy supply. And they're probably also being conservative. Here's a more radical view. This is from a company called Bernstein. They're also financial analysts. They're not environmentalists. This is their advice to their clients. This graph is the lines going across at the bottom are the long-term price of different energy sources. Henry Hub is an oil price. U.S. bituminous coal, one type of coal. Brent, another oil price. LNG, liquid natural gas. And then solar. So this is sort of a 60-year view of energy prices. They titled this graph, Welcome to the Terror Dome. Why are they saying terror? Because they're telling their clients, if their clients are invested in fossil fuels, they should be in terror right now, and they should be getting out of fossil fuels, because these financial analysts expect renewables, and particularly solar, to undercut the price of fossil fuels. This graph is a little deceptive because it's not that the price of solar will go to negative $50 or anything like that, but when you zoom out to the long term and look at this, it is very shocking, the transition that's taking place in the price of energy. And it really looks, for those of us that are in tech, we have this model of a disruptive innovation, right? That you start off with a technology that is really not very good at all. Digital cameras are an example of that. Kodak was once the world leader in photography, and they sold tens of millions of rolls of print. And digital photography came along, and everyone said, oh, who really cares about that? And now, because original digital cameras were no good, they were not nearly as good as film cameras, and they were much more expensive. And now there are hundreds of times, thousands of times more photographs taken, and photography costs far less, and Kodak's market share has dropped by billions of dollars because they didn't notice that this technology went from being very not effective to being much better. And so we see solar as a disruptive technology like that, that's going from too expensive and low quality to suddenly disrupting the entire industry. So let me stop there since I've talked for so long, and that's kind of sort of the high picture of the trends happening in innovation in sort of exponential energy technologies.
That's really amazing, Ramez. Really amazing. Thank you for sharing all this information and these perspectives. Right now we have national elections in Brazil, and we have national elections coming up in presidential elections in Argentina next year. If you could talk, I mean, if we could get this video to be seen by presidential candidates, what would you tell them? Because right now Brazil is focusing on pre-salt, Argentina is talking a lot about vaca muerta, but you seem to be saying, look, you're sitting on a gold mine and we are betting on obsolete sources of energy, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, right now I can't see you. Can you, yes. Hello, Ramez?
Yep. Can you see me now?
No, I don't. I lost your. There. So,
okay.
What would you say to presidential candidates in Brazil? And what would you say to presidential candidates in Argentina for next year? Because both of these countries seem to be talking about fossil fuels rather than solar energy. And what you're saying is we're sitting in a gold mine, right?
You are sitting on a gold mine. The world is going to move away from fossil fuels. The world is moving away from fossil fuels now. You see it happening. You see China and the U.S. Both taking action slowly to move away from fossil fuels. You see an investor group with $24 trillion in assets writing an open letter saying that they believe that we need a global carbon price. You see companies even like Shell and BP saying that they think there should be a global carbon price. And at the same time, you see that technologies like wind and solar are getting exponentially cheaper and are growing at 40% per year in the case of solar. And Argentina is one of the best endowed countries in the world in solar and in wind. So I think that it's clear that one of these technologies is poised for explosive growth in the future, and one of these technologies is poised to be limited and capped in the future, to have the world eventually turn away from it in the future. So one of these has much more long-term future than the other. I don't think that means that Argentina should necessarily completely abandon Vaca Muerta. I think that there are realities out there, and there's things to be looked at closely. But I think that it's foolish for Argentina to not be investing tremendously more in renewables at the same time.
Would you say the same applies for the rest of Latin America?
It definitely applies to the rest of Latin America. The equation varies a little bit from country to country in terms of how much they should invest in solar versus wind, but the whole area is incredibly well endowed in renewable energy.
Amazing, Ramez. Thank you so much for sharing all of this information and these views. I think it's very relevant to say that you didn't start out in energy. You got there because you're looking for a way to, I think, for a way to build a better world, and you're certainly doing that. So thank you so much for everything that you share with us.
Ignacio, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Same here.